Hey everyone, you made it to 2021. 2020 was a challenging year for so many reasons, but it also brought us some unexpected opportunities to serve and learn, to connect with you, which has been an incredible joy, and to partner with some remarkable professionals. This is LD Expert Live. We've been on a mission for a really long time to spread the word to parents that learning and attention challenges can change. This is a message that parents need because it doesn't make sense for your bright, dyslexic, or struggling learner to go through life surviving on workarounds and accommodations. We started LD Expert Live in April 2020 to provide a resource for parents and to support parents in this difficult time of the pandemic and online school. This is our 36th LD Expert episode. We did 35 shows in 2020, and we're so grateful for this opportunity that fell into our lap to get the word out and to give you some hope and tools in this crazy time. Our whole team has been focused on helping as many people as possible, and this platform has allowed us to reach just over 290,000 viewers. This is LD Expert Live, and I'm your host, Jill Stowell, founder of Stowell Learning Centers. Lauren Ma is joining me today for our Best of 2020 show. Lauren is our Director of Clinical Growth and Operations at Stowell Learning Centers, and we have an amazing show for you today.
Yes.
Hey, Lauren.
Hello. I am so excited to relive some of our best of clips of 2020. We had amazing guests on all of our shows, so it was really hard to choose our finalists, but we used YouTube analytics to choose our top 6. And then we sent it to you, the viewers, to vote on your favorites. And you gave us the top 3 and our winner. And let me tell you, it was a very fierce competition. Our guests obviously had some diehard fans, but we had so much fun putting this together for you. It was awesome.
And, I had the best time getting to know our guests. And I'm just so grateful to them for sharing their expertise. I'm telling you, these people are rock stars. Mm-hmm. Every single one of them has been incredible. They all have such a heart for helping people and shared such valuable insights and tools. Today, you get the highlights from our 6 most watched shows.
And it was really hard to choose which clips because every guest had so much good information to share. So we're going to review our favorite clips, starting with our number 6 voted episode and ending with number 1.
So here we go with our top 6 shows of 2020. Number 6, Rick and Doris Bowman talk to us about how to manage our own emotions in order to help our kids. Rick and Doris are absolutely delightful people. They are certified trauma specialists who train educational and mental health agencies all over the country. They gave us a fantastic and timely tool for managing our emotions and building resilience. Here's their heart lock-in technique.
And so we're going to do this heart lock-in technique together. And there are a couple of things I want to do as a lead into this. One is that I want to encourage you to identify before we start a renewing emotion that you feel that you can generate and actually feel it in your heart. And so sometimes this can be hard to do when you're first doing it in a purposeful, proactive kind of way. But often thinking of someone that you love or care about, it could be a family member, a friend, it could be a pet, thinking of a place that you love, that you really feel joy or ease or calm when you're in that place, maybe a past accomplishment or memory that is really positive that you're really grateful for. And a couple of the emotions that seem the easiest for people to experience when they first start doing this are often appreciation, care, or gratitude. So most of us can think of something that will help us generate those emotions. So hopefully you can think of something here that you kind of hang on to. And we're going to walk through this process. We're going to start with what we call heart-focused breathing. And essentially that is to center our attention in the area of the center of our chest, where the heart area is. And we're going to focus on breathing as if we're breathing in and out of that area where our heart is. And again, that has to do with the fact that the energy that's generated from the heart, having our attention there, is where our energy goes. And so then we're going to activate and sustain this renewing emotion. And then we're going to essentially send this renewing emotion out through the electromagnetic field again. This is just like your cell phone, guys. Nothing weird about it. Your heart is sending out an electromagnetic field that has waves, just like carrier waves, just like a cell phone. And those carrier waves can carry that emotional signal, that emotional signature from your heart. So we're going to walk through this process, and I'll just have us hold it for about a minute when we get to the activate and sustain and radiate. And then we'll jump back in here to some more chatting, but hopefully this will give you a sense of what we're talking about, how simple it is, how you can do it anywhere, and yet know that it is research backed and scientifically demonstrated to be effective. So let's go ahead, and I'll invite you, as long as you're not driving, please don't do this if you're driving, I'll invite you to close your eyes. And the reason we do that, again, isn't because this is some spiritual practice. This is because it blocks out sensory input. So we're going to close our eyes and focus our attention in the area of the heart. And if it helps you to focus there, sometimes I put my hand right there just to help me stay centered there. And so focus your attention in the area of the heart, and imagine that your breath is flowing in and out of the heart area or chest area, breathing just a little bit slower and deeper than usual. Now activate and sustain a regenerative or renewing emotion, such as appreciation, care, or compassion for someone, something that you love, a place that you love. And just really feel that emotion in your heart and sustain that feeling. And now radiate that renewing feeling first throughout your entire body. Imagine it coming out from your heart, throughout each of the cells of your body, each of the organs of your body, to your brain, and then radiate beyond you to others that you care for, that you love, those around you, those in your community. And let's continue to sustain and radiate this for about 1 minute. Okay, I'll invite you back. And so hopefully you were able to feel a little bit of a physiological shift in doing that. But what we know is that by using this practice over time, that we can become very effective at establishing our own resilience, at repatterning our baseline, and then also creating co-regulation with those around us.
That is such a powerful technique. We got a lot of feedback on how good that heart lock-in technique felt and how useful it has been for both students and parents to generate a sense of calm, especially during this stressful time. So great.
It really is. I personally use it all the time. Number 5 of our top 6 shows was special education attorney Tim Adams. When the lockdown happened, and especially as it went on much longer than anyone expected, parents had all kinds of questions about their child's IEP services. Tim is just the right person to answer those really important questions. In this clip, he's talking about implementing IEP services during the pandemic, what the law says, and how to get students' needs met.
And you know, when we recorded this show back on June 2nd, as you'll see, we keep talking about how when we get back to normal in the fall and when things get back to normal. And here we are sitting at the beginning of the next year with many students still doing remote learning. So his advice is even more relevant now than it was back in June.
Is the distance learning plan comparable education? Is it the same as the IEP, basically?
That's unfortunately, it's usually not with school districts, and it's been a struggle with among different school districts. Some school districts have tried to offer something comparable. Other school districts really, in a distance learning environment, meaning if your child was receiving, 2 hours a week of speech and language services, they would still receive 2 hours a week, but it would be in a telehealth environment. So via video conference, for example. But we've seen most school districts really cut down on the number of hours, instructional hours that they're providing to students to almost really a fraction of what they're receiving before. So, in terms of comparable, I would say most school districts have not been offering comparable programs. And this is part of the challenge, is because obviously we've never gone through as a society, we've never gone through a pandemic like this. At least most of us who are living today have never experienced this. And school districts really weren't prepared to provide a backup plan in the event of this situation. And unfortunately, we have a lot of districts that just shut down for several weeks, didn't offer any services. Mm-hmm. We've got others who, again, offered a fraction of what the child was receiving before in a distance learning environment. But the laws haven't changed. So all the rights are the same, and the services really should be comparable. So, and in some circumstances, even could be delivered in person if it's safe to do so.
This whole remote learning thing is interesting because some parents have shared that their kids are actually doing better with remote learning than they did in school because there are fewer distractions. But certainly there are a lot of kids that it isn't really working for them, or, it just really can't meet the needs of the student. So what happens then for
Sure.
these kids?
So many of the parents that I've spoken with recently, you're correct. Distance learning in some circumstances has been a blessing, but it's largely because the parent is now directly involved in providing one-to-one instruction to their child. And when you get that much attention from your parent, some kids will thrive. There are other circumstances where it's become really a challenge because anxiety levels are high in the household. The parents, are stressed out because they've got to do their full-time jobs, and now they've become impromptu teachers. And as much as we all love our kids, it's, I'm a parent of 4 children who are all doing distance learning. It's not, you have some easy days and you have some really tough days. So you have to be flexible. You have to, and school districts need to work with families to find alternatives that will allow that student to continue to make progress. And we're going to see quite a bit of we call it compensatory education, but quite a bit of makeup time, hopefully in the coming months, because many students, as a result of not having received comparable services in an IEP, are owed a number of therapies, interventions that were provided via the IEP that haven't been provided in the distance learning environment. Unfortunately, we're going to see a lot of litigation over what constitutes a comparable IEP. Does the district have the right to make unilateral changes to a student's IEP without parental consent, and then not make up time for services that were lost? We don't have all of the answers, but what I'm doing with families is we're looking at each case, each circumstance, each scenario for individual students, and we're really looking at what does this student need, what sort of environment will he or she need to thrive. And we essentially design a custom program, and then we figure out, could this be provided by a private program? Could it be provided by the public school system? Could we do a hybrid of the two? Really the process in analyzing what's appropriate for my clients and the parents that I counsel is largely the same. We start with, what does this child need? This is the very first step. And then we design the program around the needs of that child. And the circumstances and the distance, with students being educated at home, that certainly has changed, but we'll work around that. We need to start first with what the child needs.
Well, these are really tough questions right now for special education, and I'm really glad Tim is out there as a resource for families. Number 4 of our top 6 LD Expert episodes was on one of my very favorite topics, auditory processing. Auditory processing has a profound impact on learning, but it can mask as other difficulties such as attention problems, poor comprehension, trouble reading, or weak language or social skills. So children or adults with auditory processing difficulties can easily be misunderstood or misdiagnosed. The clip we chose from this show will give you the eye-opening opportunity to see what it feels like to have an auditory processing problem. Well, I promised all of you an experience, so get ready. I'm going to give you a little listening assignment. I'm going to play you an excerpt from a book by Dr. Daniel Amen. Now, he's an expert in ADHD and mental health, so this is going to be really interesting information for you. Now, this is only 90 seconds, so you're going to want to listen very carefully. You may even want to take some notes because there will be a quiz at the end. All right, here we go.
Did you know every time you have a thought, your brain releases chemicals? That's how our brain works. You have a thought, your brain releases chemicals, and an electrical transmission goes across your brain, and you become aware of what you're thinking. Thoughts are real and they have a real impact on how you feel and how you behave. Every time you have a bad thought, an unkind thought, a sad thought, or a cranky thought, your brain releases negative chemicals that make your body feel bad. When you're upset, imagine that your brain releases levels of sad or angry faces, looking to cause problems. Think about the last time you were mad. What did you feel? What feelings did you have inside your body? When most kids are mad, their muscles get tense, their heart beats faster, their hands start to sweat, and they may even begin to feel dizzy. Your body reacts to every negative thought you have. Every time you have a good thought, a happy thought, a hopeful thought, or a kind thought, your brain releases chemicals that make your body feel good. Whenever you have a happy thought, imagine your brain releases bubbles of glad or smiling faces making you feel good. Think of the last time that you had a really happy thought, such as when you got a good grade on a test or played with your pet. What feelings do you have inside your body? When most of the kids are happy, their muscles relax. Their heart beats slower, their hands become dry, and they breathe slower. Your body also reacts to your good thoughts.
I was giving a sound therapy seminar for educators and learning center owners one time, and I played that 90-second clip. At the end, one woman who was a very successful practitioner broke down in tears and said, "That's my life." That's what it may be like to have an auditory processing problem. You know, I played that clip one time for a staff meeting, and the staff didn't know that it was a simulation, but they did know of Dr. Daniel Amen. And so they were all ready to take notes. They knew this was going to be really important information. And it was fascinating to see what happened. There was one young woman in the front, and she had her paper out, and she was trying so hard to take notes through the entire thing. And she just, you could see she was listening so hard. And the further we went, the more and more tension that I could see in her body. And then the person next to her started out taking notes, and then pretty quickly just, gave up and just quit paying attention, just started looking around, looked really bored. Another one of our staff members started out taking notes and got really frustrated, and she just slammed her pencil down on the table and was really upset, especially because we had that overachiever in the front who was still taking notes. And then we had one guy on staff. Well, very quickly, he figured out he was not going to be able to get this. So he just kicked back in his chair. He started making jokes with the people around him. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is just like a classroom. That's what happens to kids when they have auditory challenges. Some kids try so hard and they end up really, really anxious. Some start and then they just give up. Some get really angry at themselves or their teacher, and they just feel like they've been tricked when they didn't hear about due dates or tests. Others get very sleepy and start yawning, which actually is the brain's way of dealing with auditory overload. So if you see that your child is, listening on their remote schooling or something, and they're yawning and yawning and yawning, they're auditorily overloaded, probably. And then some students just learn that, you know what, I might as well not even try it. I'm not going to get this. And so they just, in certain classes or when the teacher starts to give oral instruction, they just check out. Auditory processing is not your hearing, but it's how the brain perceives or thinks about the information that comes in through your ears. So let's take a look at our learning skills continuum. If you think about learning like a continuum or a ladder, academics and social skills are up at the top. The rungs on the ladder are all of the supporting learning or processing skills. Everyone just assumes that these skills are in place when kids go to school, but for about 30% of the population, at least some of those underlying skills are weak or inefficient, which can stress the attention system and cause learning to be harder than it should be. Auditory processing fits on that second from the bottom rung, that blue area, which is processing skills. When you look at how the continuum builds, you can see that weak auditory processing can get in the way of fully developing and utilizing executive function skills, and it can certainly impact comprehension, reading, academic, and social skills that are on the rungs above that. In our experience, most students who are underachieving or struggling socially or in school have challenges with auditory or listening skills. The challenges may look more like anxiety or behavior issues. You know, I've heard from a number of parents that their child actually is good at school. The teacher will say that the child tried really hard and has good behavior, but then they get home and they completely fall apart. And you just have this massive meltdown on your hands day after day because it's such a strain to work that hard to listen and maintain in school. Some kids or adults with auditory problems talk incessantly because as long as they can control the conversation, they don't have to listen. Kids with auditory problems are often accused of not paying attention. I had a student once who told me that when the teacher spoke, it was literally like the teacher in Charlie Brown cartoons saying, wah, wah, wah. So, of course, he couldn't pay attention. He was lost and frustrated, and he never felt like he knew what he was supposed to do.
You know, so many people don't know auditory processing can be trained, and we see it every single day, and it's made a huge difference for our students. So we just want that word to get out there that auditory skills absolutely can be retrained, and it can make a huge difference for learning and functioning.
Absolutely. Okay, here's what you've been waiting for. Our top 3 LD Expert Live episodes of 2020. I understand that the voting for these top 3 shows was so popular and so competitive that it literally went to the last second before midnight.
Yes, so voting ended at midnight and the votes were submitted right up until 11:59:59, and we received almost 9,000 votes. So we know our viewers really loved our guests.
All right, well, here we go. Number 3 was Dr. Jerry Weichman's episode called Stress Control Tips for Today. Dr. Weichman was our very first guest on LD Expert, and what a tremendous resource he's been. Dr. Weichman is the founder of the Weichman Clinic, affiliated with Hoag Neurosciences Institute in Newport Beach, California. He is a clinical psychologist and adolescent specialist. Dr. Weichman shared some incredible information with us for understanding your adolescents and teens, for managing stress, and helping students maintain motivation and drive with online school. I love this particular clip that we're about to show you. It's Dr. Weichman speaking directly to kids about some things they can do to deal with stress. I'm wondering if you could just talk directly to kids right now about some things they can do to deal with stress.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, first and foremost, everybody out there, everything's going to be okay. Okay, there's no way it can't be in time. So it's important you keep your eye on that one. It's important you really take care of yourself. And we got to get back to basics, especially during really trying times like these. Certain things like exercise and sleep are huge for us, especially for kids that are still growing a brain at this stage of development. Like we've found that the psychiatrist at our office will say, we can't give somebody a pill that's going to come close to help and relieve stress, anxiety, or depression the way that a 45 to 60-minute workout does. And so it's important. And a lot of kids don't like working out. You got to go work out, not because you enjoy working out, because most of us don't, but you're really going to enjoy how you feel when this is all done, because it helps give you relieve stress, anxiety, depression. It helps you to have more drive, more motivation. Helps you to retain information, recall information. There's so many reasons to do this and not a lot to prevent you from doing it. And obviously younger kids don't drive. A lot of us don't go to gyms anymore, but you have to adapt to what you have to work with to still get that exercise in. You will benefit significantly from that, I guarantee you. And when it comes to sleep, look, as you're growing a brain, it's really important for you to have sleep, and devices are distracting. You got to put those away. You got to be able to use guided imagery and visualizations to help yourself to sleep, because when you're deficient in sleep, a lot goes off. You're more irritable. You can't concentrate as well. You start becoming more negative. You don't have as much drive. It affects you across the board, not getting enough sleep. And so as small as it seems, it's really a big deal because we're finding that sleep is cumulative. So if you're getting 2 hours less sleep per night, by Friday, you're 10 hours deficient in sleep. There's no way you can make up for that over the weekend, even if you sleep till 12 or 1. So make sure you're getting your sleep. Breathing, really important right now. We forget to do breathing techniques. It's really simple. Something I call 3 times 3 times 3 breathing. It's just 3 seconds in through your nose. You hold it, you imagine the stuff that's bothering you, upsetting to you, and you blow it out of your mouth for 3 seconds. You do it 3 times in a row. It'll take the edge off of anything that you're dealing with. Again, going back to how you look at situations. Life doesn't control how you feel, you do. And by you identifying what the positive is in these situations and really challenging yourself to do this, as soon as you can identify what those positives are, it's going to have an instant effect and impact on how you feel as soon as you arrive on that. So take advantage of it. Please stay away from the news and social media. None of us feel better after diving into that, especially now. And so take advantage of what you have while you have it that you can control to make yourself feel better, because if there's ever been a time, it's now. And the last one is, it's temporary. It's not always going to be like this. It can't be. And I remember being that age and things seemed so big and you didn't see a lot of light, and the school years seemed like they went on for 3 years sometimes. And so it's important that you remind yourself, this is a temporary situation. Things get tough. We get tougher. You batten down hatches right now. Not only that, you will make it through this, but you'll come out a stronger person, to be able to deal with so much more of life.
I just love how real Dr. Weichman is and how he can be so comforting, and how comforting it was to hear him say, it's going to be okay. I really felt that. And I know a lot of teens will feel that too. So.
Right. All of us, we want to hear it's going to be okay.
Right.
Dr. Weichman has written a book for teens called How to Deal. It is so good. As soon as I read it, I had to get some more copies to share with our students. And in fact, just the other day, one of our teenage students who was reading it shared that she just connected to it so well. So great resource, How to Deal. Number 2 of our top 6 LD Expert Live episodes features one of the world's experts on neuroscience and technology, Alex Doman. Alex is the founder of Advanced Brain Technologies and the developer of TLP, the listening program. TLP has been an incredible tool for our students at Stowell Learning Centers, and in this clip, you'll learn why. Alex is talking to us about how to use sound to improve functioning and behavior. I mentioned earlier that virtually every student that we see at the Learning Center is doing a home listening program. We have so many incredible programs and tools that we use with our students, but I've often thought if I could have only one tool, it would be the auditory training or the sound therapy. So let's talk about the listening program a little bit as a therapeutic tool.
Where would you like to start, Jill? Because I think there's so many points that we can touch on. But maybe let's kick off with some fundamentals.
Okay.
And let's talk a bit about sound frequency in the brain as a foundation. So, we as human beings can process a range of sounds that are measured in what are called frequencies. And high frequencies are very high tones or high pitch. Low frequencies are low tone or low pitch. And that's a range from 20 hertz up to 20,000 hertz. So a really broad spectrum of sound that we take in and process as human beings. And different sound frequencies affect our function and behavior in different ways. So just as music tempo entrains the brain, so does sound frequency. So if we want to help calm a nervous system, ground an individual, help to integrate the lower brain areas, we'll use generally slower tempoed music with lower beats per minute, and we'll use lower sound frequencies that are very grounding to the individual. And we would call that in the listening program the green zone. So the listening program music is actually color coded. And then in the orange zone, these would be mid-tempo frequencies or mid frequency tones and moderate tempos. And that orange zone relates to attention, to focus, to communication, and to learning. And then the higher frequencies with faster tempos, which is the red zone, is more frontal executive functions. So it's spatial orientation, it's planning, it's creativity, it's working memory skills. So what actually happens is different sound frequencies train different brain regions related to those functions. And that's one of the fascinating things about music, is that we can dial in different brain regions with different sound frequency. Now, the truth is we can benefit from training the entire brain, and that's what's done with the listening program. So in the protocols, we'll go through a progression of what we call the blue zone music, which is full spectrum music across the sound frequencies, which gently trains all of the brain centers that are receiving that music. It lays a foundation to build the house upon of listening. And then we'll train the green zone and get that sensory motor foundation strong and our stress resilience strong. Then we'll build to communication skills, then higher order thinking, then we'll down train. And you may have picked up a theme that the sound frequency progression in the listening program follows the model of human child development. So the same way the brain develops, the music follows that first progression, because as a young child first becomes physically efficient. And then once we have that physical efficiency, we begin to develop receptive and expressive language and communication skills. And once we have communication happening, higher order thinking begins to happen with more complexity. So we go from the brainstem to the midbrain up to the cortex and then train back down. So we're actually able to get a whole brain training over time. And all we need to do the program is have a pair of approved headphones, have an online subscription or an iPod with a personalized playlist, and then to work with a provider, just as you have providers at Stowell Learning Centers that take you through the progression of the training that's right for you. So there are different protocols, and then based on what an individual's goals are and where their current level of brain performance is, a program will be selected that's the right match for them today. Then they'll follow that progression and can lead to other programs over time.
Well, it has been an incredible tool for us and for our students. The impact of therapeutic listening or sound therapy has been absolutely profound for our students. We almost always use it in conjunction with other programming, but it facilitates everything we do, because music can just get into the brain in a way that we can't get any other way. I remember thinking about the green zone. I was remembering a brilliant little boy whose behavior was so out of control that his parents couldn't take him anywhere. And he started doing the TLP Spectrum program because we really wanted to get that grounding and settling going for him. And his parents saw an immediate settling in his behavior. So his program, as you know, is 5 days listening and 2 days off. And his parents called at the end of the first week begging for him to be able to listen over the weekend as well, because they'd seen such a profound change.
As parents, when we begin to see our children respond to something, we want to do more, right? And we don't want to risk losing that change that's happening. And, you know, as you've learned in your 21 years of practice with the listening program, Jill, we know the brain needs periods for integration. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting in many of the, you know, research studies on the listening program, and there's a large body of independent research on outcomes with TLP, that we measure the most change not during the period of intervention, but actually when we've stopped and given the brain a break for a period of time, the brain consolidates and integrates those changes. And that's where we tend to see the greatest outcomes. Mm-hmm. So, you know, what we're seeing while we're doing it's wonderful. The good news is what's ahead is generally even better.
Right. As the, you know, the neuroplasticity of the brain allows it to change, and then for, you know, a period of time afterwards, it's almost, to me, it's almost like it's just settling in and getting really solid there.
Well, you know, as we know, we're teaching the brain, and it's learning, and it's developing new skills and new abilities. And, you know, really what we're doing with the listening program is giving the brain exercise. And we're exercising it in processing sound frequency, in volume changes, in spatial orientation to our environment. So there are many aspects of the auditory system that are being trained. Mm-hmm. And, you know, often people say, well, how does, you know, sound link to movement? How does it link to communication? How does it link to thinking? And one of the interesting things is that when you map a brain with functional imaging that is listening to music, it touches almost all brain regions, from the subcortical areas to the cortical areas, as we mentioned. Sensory integration, sensory motor function, language communication and attention, and higher order thinking skills are all touched when we listen to music. Mm-hmm. And music can be used to, you know, change our neurochemistry, right? To boost dopamine or serotonin, to give us those feel-good hormones that allow us and motivate us to do things and to keep coming back to them. And it's one of the, I think, reasons we see such high compliance with the listening program is that it feels good to put on the headphones and experience the music. And we're intrinsically motivated to get that feeling again. The brain has a drive to come back to it. And that drive to come back to it allows us to continue and sustain these programs that, as you know, we, you know, generally do over a course of several months.
Right, right. You know, I have to, you mentioned auditory processing in there, and I just have to mention auditory processing because it's a big piece of what we do. We get so many students with difficulty with articulation or reading or language, and those things tend to have an auditory base. And I was thinking about how the music, training the auditory system allows it to process information that it wasn't really tuning into before. We had an 11-year-old who couldn't pronounce certain sounds in his speech, even after years of speech therapy. And within 3 weeks of starting his listening program, he was able to pronounce all of his sounds in connected speech because the brain was now, in a sense, being able to hear it where it couldn't before.
Yeah, you bring up a really important point, Jill, right? Because we can only reproduce the sounds that the brain can process, right? So if we're not understanding the messages coming in, it's hard to express in response to these messages. So if we have disordered auditory processing, the brain isn't understanding what it's hearing clearly. And language, phonemes are made up of sound frequencies. And music is made up of sound frequencies. So it is a way to train the brain how to process language sounds. So we frequently see these improvements in reading comprehension and reading fluency, in receptive language, in expressive language skills. So, especially when we get into the orange zone, when we're training those frequencies in speech and language, we're touching Wernicke's and Broca's areas in the brain for receptive and expressive language, and reinforcing the brain's ability to understand these sounds. And the way the brain learns is practice. And what we're doing with the listening program is we're giving the brain practice in auditory processing, but rather than using language as the input, music's the input. And again, the brain feels good when it gets that music training and wants to keep coming back to it.
We've been using sound therapy for so many years and have seen such profound changes with our students that all that information is second nature to us. But it was really neat to hear it from the advanced brain technologies developer himself. So great reminder.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, everyone, are you ready? Our number one top show of 2020 is, drumroll please, Dr. Giancarlo Licata, founder of Vital Brain Training and Vital Head and Spinal Care in Pasadena, California, talking about understanding and improving your child's attention. We always love having Dr. Licata on the show because it's so much fun to nerd out with him about what's happening in the brain and to look at the practical applications.
Right. And it's no surprise that he was our number one fan favorite. And I love this segment that you're going to see because it really helps parents understand what's going on with kids with attention challenges or impulsivity. And it gives them hope for alternatives to medication. So no surprise that he's our fan favorite.
Let's take a look. Right. A couple of times you've kind of alluded to something that that I find really interesting. So many kids who have attention challenges will be described as impulsive. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about, from a brain perspective, kind of what that means if we've got this impulsivity going on and low attention. I find that a really interesting thing, and I think it adds some clarity.
Yeah. And I'm gonna, for some of our parents who may have already have children who are diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, I'm gonna classify it in the way that the DSM-5, the common way to diagnose ADHD is set up, and then I'll talk about looking at it from a performance way. If our child is diagnosed with ADHD, usually based on a checklist behavior, right? There's no actual test, functionally to see what's going on. Did we check enough boxes off the list? Then you've got it, right? That's first of all. But it seems like they subcategorize that into, do I have ADHD inattentive, meaning it's harder for me to hold my attention, or do I have ADHD impulsive hyperactive, right? I'm impulsive hyperactive. I'm just going all over the place. And we all have kids or know kids that are like that. They're just everywhere. Johnny, sit down. Johnny, sit down. Johnny, stop kicking your sister. Johnny, stop, hanging on the chandelier. Johnny, stop, right? And so that's the impulsive hyperactive, right? And then some people, they diagnose them as having a little bit of both. I'm inattentive and I'm impulsive hyperactive. Right now, okay, that's helpful, and they have medications to try to match that. Now, what we're looking at though is the impulsivity is oftentimes going to be driven by another part of the brain, and the impulsivity is a part that's it's go. It's when I'm interrupting you in the middle of a conversation. It's when I'm in the middle of something and I just need to get up and go do something else. And so it's a jumpiness. It's an inability to just be here, right? And so now in the brain, there's certain regions of the brain around the midline as well as in the front midline that tends to make us feel a little bit more jumpy, just going after it. Now, and so that's a different region of the brain. Then the part of our brain that can't, I can be present, but maybe I'm not paying attention to you. I can be present, but I'm not following what you're telling me, right? This is the child who's they're sitting in their chair, they're cooperating, but you're like, okay, are you following me? Step, point A, point B, point C, point D, and by point B, they're just somewhere else. Sometimes they're kind of in their brain and they're lost in thoughts, or they're daydreaming, right? That's another part of attention that's not right. It's not performed well. It's not tuned in, but it's different than this impulsivity, right? And sometimes our kids have a little bit of both, right? So so I don't know if that answers the question, but that impulsivity is something that is different than just the inattention. And sometimes our kids have a little bit of both of them intertwined.
Right. And I know that you and I have collaborated a little bit, and it's been really interesting to me to get to see the brain mapping that you do with students. And we have talked about the fact that sometimes with that impulsivity, they are trying so hard to pay attention, but they can't. And then if the attention part of the brain is low and impulse control is high, then you've got this kid that's working so hard and so exhausted by this, even though that may not be what it looks like on the outside, but that the brain is actually working too hard to pay attention.
Oh yeah, yes, it's something that we can see, and we'll probably, we're already talking about brain maps, and I'll probably start defining that and set the stage for brain maps. But yes, there are a lot of kids who we will map, and we'll do also additional tests like an IVA 2 attention and impulse control test, and that's something that you do as well, I know. And we can see something called stamina. This is that kind of grit part of the brain. This is the kind of the ability of us to just push through, to just, this is not easy, but I'm going to keep going, right? And that's some of the exhaustion that we'll see in a child, where they're really trying hard. I mean, they're really trying to pay attention. They just can't. And so I say it's like you get this amazingly wonderful Rottweiler puppy, and it's just so strong and it's so powerful and it's pulling you all over the place, right? Or so it's just I have a metaphor of just a very strong, poorly trained puppy that is dragging the owner everywhere, all across the neighborhood. And that's what sometimes our brains or our children's brains feel like. And now the problem is that that child isn't they're not being disobedient, right? They're not trying to get in trouble. They're not, there's not a, they're not trying to do the opposite of what you want them to do. Their little puppy, right, is out of control. It's not able to be trained. And so we can try to drug the puppy. Okay, that's one way to do it. But what if we can identify what the puppy's doing, identify where it is, and begin to train it in a way that's a little bit more humane, a little bit more compassionate, there's a little bit more wisdom to it. That's what we're trying to do, and that's what you do so well as well.
And we are going to talk about that in more depth a little bit later, because I just think it's so important for people to understand that there are many ways to look at these things. So I know when we have talked before, you've talked about how there are some things that can disrupt attention or even mimic attention challenges, things that are going on so now it looks like the child has ADHD. Right.
And so, okay, so we set the stage for this conversation around the attention is not necessarily a disease. It's more of things that are functioning too high or too low. And we identified already a few different things, like my ability to hold attention, my ability to resist the puppy, the impulses. Now, the challenge is when I just go back on that list and I start checking off behaviors, the problem is there are other things that will mimic those two regions of the brain that will cause the person to check off something off the list. Right. And so let's say so what are the imposters that get in the way of our ability to pay attention? Right. Well, internal anxiety and rumination will look like inattention, right? And I'm sure we've done it before, right? Our spouse is talking to us and they're telling us about their day, and all of a sudden we're here just really worrying, just really racking our brains on something. And sometimes it's on loop. It's not necessarily like we're making any progress on it. We just somehow feel the need to kind of keep going it over and over and over again. Well, that's the anterior cingulate of the brain. It's what the brain does. And if that's kind of on overdrive, on overactive, it will look like I'm not paying attention to my spouse. Like I don't care. And of course, the spouse is telling themselves the story of see, they never care about what I have to say. They don't care about my day. It's whatever their life is more important than mine. But in my brain, what's mimicking inattention is this internal anxiety kind of hamster wheel, right? And so now, when we brain map, we can see regions of the brain that are doing that. They're overactive. It's front midline. We can see it on a map, and it's very high in what we call high betas. And I'm now throwing terms that I'll define in a second. But the whole point is, our child is really dealing with a form of, again, it's not a good word, but kind of an anxiety, right? It's an over stress. It's an overstimulation. It's an internal kind of suffering, really. And now we're yelling at them because they're not paying attention to the teacher. And so the child is stressed. The child feels anxious. The child's ruminating. And then the teacher's saying, well, what's the square root of 64? And Bobby's not paying attention, right? And so it's like, Bobby's never paying attention. It's always the same thing. I call on him and he's just never responding. He's always like, what, where, why, right? And so that's a mimicker. It mimics the inability to pay attention, but really it's a rumination. It's an anxiety. It's stress. Okay. So that's one. And that's, and I think we work with soul learning centers. We have clients in common, and that was a common thing, that one client who had a form of inattention, that was something we saw on the brain map. And that was something we were able to help train a little bit. And we saw how all of a sudden Bobby was able to pay more attention to what's interacting right in front of them, because they're not stuck in their little world, Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think we kind of forget as we go through our day-to-day existence that there's a lot more to what we see. I mean, what's going on in the brain is pretty profound, actually. But a lot of times kids who have attention challenges, they move or they tap or they click their pen and it drives everybody crazy.
Yeah. Yes.
But, that could actually be something that they're doing to try to calm themselves.
Yeah. It's interesting. And there are two kind of versions of that we see or that we know about. I'm sure there are more. And so there's moving and tapping. Sometimes we do to calm, right? When my wife knows that I'm overly stimulated about something, I'm stressed out about something, I'm really trying to, it's getting me all worked up. She knows because my leg's just going, right? My leg is just moving all over the place. And so what I'm trying to do is down regulate my nervous system through movement, right? Movement ends up being a little bit of a down, well, it can down or up regulate our body. I'm going to give two examples. And so one of them we know about is when we're trying to down regulate. And so there are certain kids that, again, they're dealing with stress, and we're going to call this stress, but just stressful homes, stressful, parents are fighting. Maybe parents are going through a divorce. Maybe, their older brother or sister is dealing with some kind of drugs or issues of teenage years. Corona, and the kids' whole worlds seems like everything is falling apart. And so what happens is they feel very, very over aroused, and aroused not in the fancy word or fancy way of the word, but aroused like my nervous system is just tuned up too high. And so movement ends up being a way to kind of lower that arousal. It's trying to regulate a little bit, right? Yeah. So now the child, really the solution for that child is to help that child feel reconnected, to feel more regulated, right? And so the solution is not going to be to drug the child. And in fact, that child we give certain medications to, and they're going to feel even more. And they may feel like they can focus, but they'll have such an increased level of anxiety inside of them that, yeah, they're getting better grades, but really probably their quality of life may not be much better.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if that's movement to downregulate, there's also movement to upregulate. And so think about if you're driving long hours at night and you've got another 2 hours to go and you're falling asleep at the wheel, right? What will we tend to do? We'll tend to open the windows. We'll tend to bring the radio really loud. We'll tend to start moving around, right? Because what we're actually trying to do is we're trying to upregulate our body. We're trying to get our nervous system to be more aroused because it's not aroused enough. It's not tuned up high enough. And so sometimes we'll see kids who are just kind of falling asleep or they're just kind of not there. And all of a sudden you just see them, okay, all right, and they're just moving all over the place. Well, they're trying to upregulate. Now there's the whole point. There are other ways to do it. There are ways to do it. If you can identify what it is, there's other tools. There's other tools that you can do to do that. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you have enjoyed our Best of 2020 episode. We are so grateful to all of you for showing up, for telling us what you need, and for every one of our guests who have come on to share their tips and expertise with you. I feel so honored and impressed by every single one of them.
Yes, we've had so many amazing guests this year. And thank you to all of you fans for participating and voting in the poll. Thanks. It was a lot of fun.
It was. We hope LD Expert Live has been a bright spot for you in 2020. There is a whole team backstage that's making all of this happen. And I think you should meet them. And here they are. Megan, wave to us, Megan. There she is. She books our amazing guests and takes great care of them. Christy does our graphic design and she does the cameras on the show. And David is our producer and runs the graphics during the show. So thank you, team. You are amazing. We could not possibly do this without you. This is LD Expert Live, your place for answers and solutions for learning disabilities, dyslexia, and attention challenges. Next Tuesday, attorney Richard Isaacs of the California Special Needs Law Group will be answering parent questions about special education, IEPs, and missed services during the pandemic. So get your questions ready and join us next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific. Stowell Learning Centers are open for remote sessions and screenings, so you can access our services wherever you are in the world. We are also seeing students on site with all of the COVID precautions. We work with children and adults doing targeted brain training to improve attention, thinking, and learning. If you would like a free consultation for yourself or your child, give us a call or visit our website at stowellcenter.com. A huge thank you to all of our amazing guests and to all of you for making the voting so much fun and viewing our best of show. Thanks, Lauren, for joining me for this. It's been a lot of fun. We love you all. Happy New Year.